Ambassador Threlvix had never sweated before, physically impossible for his species, really. The Corthan people had evolved on a frozen moon where moisture crystallized before it could form droplets. But standing in the Grand Assembly Hall, watching the human delegation pack their materials into sleek metal cases, he was pretty sure he understood the concept now. Perhaps we should reconsider, he ventured, his vocal translator struggling to mask the tremor in his voice. The human woman, Director Elizabeth Harmon, didn't even look up from the tablet she was sliding into her briefcase. Reconsider what exactly? Your proposal to limit human expansion to 14 systems? Or the part where you suggested we share all our defensive technologies while contributing 70% of our military resources to the Council's protection force? Threlvix's face tendrils twitched. The Yarvek representative, High Chancellor Moros, stepped forward with what he probably thought was diplomatic grace. It came across more like a predator circling wounded prey. Wrong move, buddy. Director Harmon, surely you understand that humanity's rapid expansion has caused concern among the established civilizations. We have maintained peace for 6,000 cycles. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 200 of your years. Elizabeth finally looked up, and Threlvix actually took a step backward. Those eyes. Humans had such expressive eyes, and right now, hers were absolutely glacial. Let me get this straight, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that made every translator in the room work overtime. You're concerned about our expansion because we've colonized 42 systems in 2 centuries. Meanwhile, the Yarvek Concordat controls 317 systems, the Corthan Federation has 208, and the Milvari hegemony occupies 193. But we're the problem. Moros's skin flickered through several colors. Annoyance, probably. Those territories were acquired over millennia, through proper channels and diplomatic negotiations. Right. Diplomacy. Elizabeth's laugh could have cut steel. Is that what you call it when the Yarvek blockaded the Thessian system until they signed over mining rights? Or when the Corthan Federation accidentally destroyed 3 Belvari colony ships and then graciously offered to mediate the territorial dispute? Threlvix felt his respiratory slits clench. How did she know about that? The Belvari incident had been classified for 800 cycles. Another human, General Marcus Webb. No, wait. The roster said his name was General Thomas Caldwell. He stood from his seat, his military uniform immaculate despite the 17-hour negotiation session they'd just endured. The man looked like he could go another 17 without breaking stride. Show off. Let's be honest about what's happening here, Caldwell said, his voice carrying that gravelly quality that made Threlvix think of grinding tectonic plates. Not comforting. You've divided the galaxy into neat little spheres of influence. You've got your territories, your trade routes, your protected systems. Then humanity shows up, and suddenly there are colonies in systems you'd written off as worthless. Except they're not worthless, are they? We found ways to terraform worlds you considered uninhabitable. We established trade routes through nebulae you thought were impassable. And now you're realizing that all those garbage systems you ignored for millennia, they're actually pretty valuable real estate. The silence that followed could have suffocated stars. Councillor Vryn of the Milvari hegemony rose from her seat, all 6 of her arms spreading in what her species considered a placating gesture. To humans, it probably looked like something trying to give a very uncomfortable hug. General Caldwell, we merely seek to prevent conflict. Surely you can understand the need for established protocols and limitations. Oh, we understand perfectly, Elizabeth interjected. You want us to stop growing so you can catch up. You want our technology, because in 200 years, we've developed innovations that surpass your millennia of stagnation. And most importantly, you want us to hand over our defensive capabilities while accepting numerical restrictions that would leave us vulnerable to, well, anyone who decides humans would make better servants than partners. Threlvix couldn't help himself. That's not. We would never. Wouldn't you? Elizabeth's eyebrow arched in a way that made him want to check his translator for glitches. 3 months ago, the Yarvek Concordat issued a formal protest about human colonies in the Outer Reach. Last month, Corthan survey ships were spotted mapping human settlements in the Deneb cluster. 2 weeks ago, Milvari trade vessels established a blockade pattern around our agricultural worlds, which I'm sure was purely coincidental. And yesterday, All three of your governments submitted the exact same proposal to this council, down to the specific system designations and resource allocation percentages. What an amazing coincidence that must have been. Moros's skin had gone an unpleasant shade of purple. You accuse us of conspiracy? I accuse you of being terrible at it, Elizabeth shot back. If you're going to coordinate a joint effort to box in humanity, at least have the creativity to submit different proposals. I mean, come on, the same typo in all three documents? The word territory spelled territory in paragraph 6. That's just lazy. Somewhere in the back of the assembly hall, Threlvix heard someone make a choking sound. Probably Delegate Shen, who'd been trying very hard not to laugh for the past hour. Elizabeth continued, clearly on a roll now. So here's what's going to happen. Humanity is withdrawing from these peace talks because they're not peace talks. They're surrender negotiations. And we're not interested in surrendering. We're going to continue expanding into unclaimed systems. We're going to continue developing our technology. We're going to continue trading with whoever wants to trade with us, on terms we mutually agree upon. And if that makes you uncomfortable? She paused, snapping her briefcase closed with a sound like a judge's gavel. Well, that sounds like a you problem. General Caldwell was already moving toward the exit, his team falling in behind him with practiced precision. Elizabeth turned to follow, then paused and looked back at the assembled council. Oh, and one more thing, she said, her voice carrying that casual tone that Threlvix was rapidly learning to dread. We know about the joint fleet exercise you've been planning, the one scheduled for next month in the neutral zone, right along our border. The exercise involving 247 capital ships, 612 support vessels, and enough firepower to sterilize a solar system? Yeah, we've known about that for 6 weeks. We've also been tracking your supply shipments, monitoring your communication protocols, and mapping your staging areas. The temperature in the assembly hall seemed to drop several degrees. Threlvix felt his respiratory slits open wide in shock. How? Vryn demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Elizabeth's smile could have been classified as a weapon in 17 different star systems. Because we're human. We're paranoid, we're creative, and we've spent our entire history fighting each other. You've had 6,000 cycles of peace? That's adorable. We've had maybe 6 decades where some part of our planet wasn't actively at war. You've spent millennia perfecting diplomacy and trade. We've spent that time perfecting the art of knowing when someone's planning to stab us in the back. She turned to go again, then stopped. Oh no. Threlvix knew that pause. That was the pause of someone who'd just remembered one more thing, and it was going to hurt. By the way, Elizabeth said, her voice conversational now, almost friendly. About that fleet exercise? We'd like to send observers, to learn from such experienced military powers. We'll send about 30 ships. Nothing major, just some scouts and a few support vessels. I'm sure you won't mind. The look on Moros's face suggested he minded very much. 30 ships would constitute a significant military presence in the neutral zone, would it? Elizabeth's expression was pure innocence. It was absolutely terrifying. That's strange, because according to neutral zone regulations, Article 17, Section 4, Paragraph 9, any council member is permitted to position up to 50 vessels in the zone for observation and research purposes. We're well under the limit. Unless you're suggesting we shouldn't follow council regulations? Checkmate, Threlvix thought numbly. She'd just used their own rules to position human warships exactly where they didn't want them. General Caldwell was grinning now, which was somehow worse than when he'd been serious. Those observers will arrive in 72 hours. We'll share our findings with the full council, of course. Transparency and all that. The human delegation filed out of the assembly hall in perfect formation, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. The massive doors closed behind them with a definitive boom that felt like a coffin lid slamming shut. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on the assembly like a physical force. Then Chancellor Moros turned to Threlvix, his skin flickering through colors so rapidly it nearly triggered a seizure. This is your fault. You insisted the humans were reasonable. You said they would accept compromise. I thought, Threlvix started, then stopped. What had he thought? That a species which had clawed its way from stone tools to Faster than light travel in 10,000 years would just roll over because some ancient civilizations told them to slow down. I may have miscalculated. Miscalculated? Vrin's voice was shrill now, all 6 arms trembling. They knew about the fleet exercise. They've been spying on us for weeks, maybe months. How deep does their intelligence network go? What else do they know? That was an excellent question, and Threlvix really wished someone would stop asking it. Councillor Shen, the Delphiri representative who'd been quiet until now, finally spoke up. His species was known for careful deliberation and rarely taking sides. Perhaps we should have considered their history more carefully. They call it the Cold War. Decades where they monitored each other's every move, where they built weapons capable of destroying their own planet, where they created entire networks of spies and counter-spies. And that was just between their own nations, on one planet. Your point? Moros snapped. My point is that we just tried to outmaneuver a species that spent centuries perfecting paranoia as an art form. A species that weaponizes information the way we weaponize antimatter. A species that literally wrote the book on mutually assured destruction and then decided that wasn't scary enough, so they made it scarier. Shen's laugh was bitter. We never stood a chance in this negotiation. Threlvix sank into his seat, watching the closed doors where the human delegation had exited. Through the massive viewing window, he could see their shuttle departing from the station, its engines burning bright against the starfield. Delegate Cross, who'd been silent through the entire debacle, finally cleared his throat. What do we do now? That was another excellent question. Ambassador Threlvix thought about Elizabeth Harmon's cold eyes, about General Caldwell's confident stride, about the way the humans had walked out of peace talks like they were declining a dinner invitation rather than rejecting the demands of 3 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Now, he said quietly, now we figure out what we've just done, because something tells me that humanity withdrawing from these talks is not the end of this situation. Outside the viewport, more human ships were arriving at the station. Not warships exactly, but not civilian vessels either. Corvettes. Fast, nimble, and according to intelligence reports, absolutely bristling with weapons humanity had somehow forgotten to mention in their technology-sharing proposals. They were ready for this, Vrin whispered. They knew we'd try to limit them. They prepared for it. Threlvix nodded slowly, a horrible realization settling over him like ice water. We assumed they came to negotiate. They came to deliver a message. What message? Moros demanded. The ambassador watched another human ship dock at the station, its hull painted with some kind of emblem he didn't recognize. A bird of prey, talons extended, carrying arrows in one claw and an olive branch in the other. Peace on their terms, Threlvix said softly, or no peace at all. The assembly hall remained silent. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent, and somewhere in the darkness between them, humanity was expanding, growing, adapting, doing what they'd always done best. Surviving, despite what anyone else wanted. And the Galactic Council was just beginning to understand exactly what that meant. 3 weeks after the humans walked out, Ambassador Threlvix stood in his private quarters, staring at reports that made his respiratory slits constrict with each passing line. The galactic equivalent of a heart attack was looking pretty appealing right about now. Explain this to me again, he said into his communicator, knowing he wouldn't like the answer any better the second time. Slowly, Intelligence Officer Kurin's voice crackled through, and she sounded about as thrilled as he felt. 17 more human colonies. Established in the last 20 days, all in systems we'd classified as uninhabitable. They're terraforming at a rate we didn't think was possible. The Helix Nebula region, which we've avoided for 3,000 cycles because of radiation levels, they've got mining operations there now. Shielding technology we've never seen before. Fantastic. Wonderful. Anything else to ruin my day? The human trade network has expanded by 40%. They've established agreements with the Phyrexian Commonwealth, the Talvor Republic, and, this is the interesting part, the Outer Rim Independence. Threlvix felt something cold settle in his midsection. The Outer Rim Independence were systems that had rejected Council membership for centuries. Nobody traded with them. Nobody could get them to agree on anything. How? Apparently humans don't try to dictate terms. They show up, they offer fair prices, they actually honor their contracts, and they don't ask for territorial concessions. Revolutionary concept, I know. The sarcasm was thick enough to terraform a planet. Threlvix didn't blame her. The situation had gone from bad to catastrophic, and they'd done it to themselves. A priority signal interrupted his thoughts. Chancellor Moros, naturally. The Yarvek leader had been bombarding him with messages ever since their joint fleet exercise had turned into the most expensive embarrassment in Council history. "Ambassador, we need to discuss the human observers," Moros said the moment the connection opened. His skin was that particular shade of red that indicated extreme agitation. "Good. Misery loved company. You mean the 30 ships that showed up and proceeded to record every tactical maneuver, decode our communication protocols, and map our fleet formations with such precision that they sent us a courtesy report pointing out our defensive vulnerabilities?" Threlvix couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "Those observers? They had no right. They had every right. We wrote the regulations. They followed them. And now they know everything about how our combined fleets operate." Threlvix pulled up the human report on his screen. It was 73 pages long and professionally devastating. "Did you read their analysis? They identified 14 critical weaknesses in our formation strategy. 14. They've been spacefaring for 200 years, and they found flaws in tactics we've used for millennia." Moros made a sound like a dying engine. "The Council is demanding action. The Council can demand whatever it wants. What exactly are we supposed to do? We tried intimidation. We tried diplomatic pressure. We tried economic restrictions. The humans ignored all of it and somehow came out stronger. We could." "Don't." Threlvix cut him off. "Don't even say it. If you're thinking about military action, remember those 30 observer ships. They weren't just recording our exercises. They were sending a message. They were showing us exactly how easily they could infiltrate our operations, gather intelligence, and walk away with everything they needed to counter any threat we might pose." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Threlvix wondered if the connection had dropped. Then Moros spoke again, and his voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. "Intelligence reports suggest the humans have been conducting their own fleet exercises in the Kepler expanse. That's deep space. Nothing out there but dead systems and asteroid fields." "Exactly. No witnesses, no observers. Whatever they're testing, they don't want anyone to see it yet." That cold feeling in Threlvix's midsection got colder. Humans being secretive about military capabilities was like the universe's worst surprise party. You knew something was coming, but you had no idea what, and it was definitely going to be bigger than expected. His console chimed with an incoming message. "Urgent priority. From the human embassy." "I have. And to go," he told Moros, cutting the connection before the Chancellor could protest. He opened the message, and his day got infinitely worse. Director Elizabeth Harmon was requesting a private meeting today, in neutral territory. Just the two of them. Threlvix stared at the message for a solid minute, running through every possible scenario. None of them ended well. But refusing wasn't an option either. He sent his acceptance and began preparing for what would probably be the most uncomfortable conversation of his very long career. 4 hours later, he sat across from Elizabeth Harmon in a private conference room on Station Meridian, a neutral trading post that technically didn't fall under anyone's jurisdiction. She looked exactly as he remembered, calm, composed, and like she knew something you didn't, which was absolutely terrifying. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, sliding a data chip across the table. "I wanted to share something before it becomes general knowledge." Threlvix eyed the chip like it might explode. Given human creativity, that wasn't entirely out of the question. "What is it?" "Our response to the Council's proposal." "You already gave your response. You walked out." "That was our emotional response." Her smile was small and didn't reach her eyes. "This is our practical one." Against his better judgment, Threlvix inserted the chip into his reader. What appeared on the screen made him forget how to breathe for several seconds. It was a proposal, a human proposal, for a new galactic framework. "You can't be serious," he whispered, scrolling through page after page of detailed policy recommendations, territorial guidelines, trade agreements, and military cooperation protocols. "Completely serious. We've spent the last 3 weeks consulting with every independent system in the galaxy. The ones you've been ignoring for centuries because they wouldn't join your little club. Turns out, they have a lot of opinions about how things should work. Who knew? Threlvix kept reading, and the picture became clearer and more alarming with each section. The humans hadn't just been expanding and trading, they'd been building a coalition. A massive coalition of independent systems, minor civilizations, and unaligned territories that collectively represented nearly 40% of the galaxy's inhabited worlds. "This is impossible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The documentation was all there: treaties, signed agreements, mutual defense pacts, all of it dated within the last 6 months. "You've been planning this since before the peace talks." "We've been preparing for multiple scenarios," Elizabeth corrected. "The peace talks were one option. This was another. Your behavior at those talks told us which path to take. You manipulated us. We gave you choices. You chose poorly." She leaned forward, and her expression hardened. "Let me be very clear about something, Ambassador. Humanity didn't come to the galaxy looking for a fight. We came looking for partnership, for mutual growth, for a chance to be part of something bigger than ourselves. But we learned a long time ago to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. And this framework gives everyone a seat at the table. Protects territorial rights for all civilizations, not just the old ones. Establishes fair trade practices. Creates mutual defense obligations that work both ways. Basically, all the things your council should have been doing for the last 6,000 cycles, but were too busy maintaining your monopolies to bother with." Threlvix felt something very much like shame, which was a new and unpleasant experience. "The Council will never accept this. The Council doesn't have a choice." Elizabeth's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "In 72 hours, this framework will be presented simultaneously to every government in the galaxy. We already have commitments from 63% of independent systems and 14 former Council protectorates. If the major powers want to maintain relevance, they'll join. If not, they'll find themselves increasingly isolated in a galaxy that's moving forward without them. That's blackmail. That's politics." She stood, smoothing her jacket. "Your council tried to use your size and age to dictate terms. We're using our adaptability and our alliances to change the game. Don't hate the player, Ambassador. Hate the game you created." Threlvix looked at the proposal again, seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't just comprehensive. It was brilliant. It addressed every major complaint from minor civilizations while establishing protections that even the major powers would find beneficial, if they weren't too proud to admit it. "Why are you showing this to me first?" he asked. "Because you're reasonable. Because I think you actually believe those peace talks were about peace, not just control. And because humanity doesn't want enemies, Ambassador. We want partners. But we'll settle for respect, if that's all that's available." She moved toward the door, then paused. That pause. Threlvix had learned to dread that pause. "One more thing," Elizabeth said. "Those fleet exercises in the Kepler expanse? The ones your intelligence services have been worrying about? Yes? We were testing new propulsion systems. Faster-than-light jumps with 98% accuracy over distances we couldn't manage before. We can now move our entire fleet from one end of the galaxy to the other in approximately 4 hours. We wanted you to know that, not as a threat, but as a fact. We can defend our allies anywhere, anytime. Keep that in mind when you're explaining this framework to your council." She left, and Threlvix sat alone in the conference room, staring at the proposal that would reshape galactic civilization. The humans had just checkmated the entire council without firing a single shot. The next 72 hours were chaos. The framework went public, and the galaxy exploded with reactions. Minor civilizations celebrated. Independent systems rushed to sign on. The major powers scrambled to understand what had just happened. The emergency council session was predictably dramatic. Moros ranted about human aggression. Vryn demanded sanctions. Others called for military response. But Councillor Shen, quiet Shen who rarely spoke, stood and delivered a speech that cut through the hysteria like a blade. "We are arguing about whether to accept a framework that gives us everything we claim to want: peace, stability, fair trade, mutual protection. The only thing it doesn't give us is absolute control, and that's what actually bothers us. The humans offered partnership, and we demanded submission. Now they've built a new system without us, and we're angry that they didn't wait for our permission." The silence that followed was deafening. Threlvix rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber. "I've spent the last 3 weeks analyzing every interaction with the humans, every conversation, every negotiation, every tactical decision. And I've realized something. We've been treating them like children who needed guidance. They've been treating us like potential partners who failed the audition. The difference in perspective explains everything that happened." "So, what do you suggest?" Moros demanded. "I suggest we accept their framework, not because we're beaten, but because it's actually better than what we had. I've read every clause, every provision. It protects our interests while expanding opportunities for everyone. The humans didn't build this to hurt us. They built it to work without us. There's a difference." The vote took 6 hours. In the end, pragmatism won over pride. The council voted to join the new framework, with modifications and input, but fundamentally accepting the human proposal. 2 months later, Threlvix attended the first assembly under the new system. The chamber was twice the size of the old one, filled with representatives from civilizations that had never had a voice before. The energy was different. Hopeful, maybe, or perhaps just different enough to feel like hope. Elizabeth Harmon found him during a recess, offering a beverage that was apparently traditional at human diplomatic functions. Coffee, she called it. It tasted like burnt dirt, but he didn't say that. "You voted for the framework," she said. "Not a question." "I voted for survival. Your species has a saying about ships and sinking, I believe." She laughed, and it sounded genuine this time. "We also have a saying about being careful what you wish for. Your council wanted humanity to slow down, to fit into your established order. Instead, we built a new order. Careful what you wish for, Ambassador. Will you hold this over us? Our failure at the peace talks?" Elizabeth considered the question, watching the diverse crowd of representatives mingling in ways that would have been impossible under the old system. History is full of empires that got comfortable and stopped innovating. They always fall when someone hungrier comes along. We didn't come to the galaxy to topple empires, Ambassador. We came to find our place in it. You tried to deny us that place, so we made our own. If there's a lesson in that, it's yours to learn, not ours to teach." Threlvix watched her walk away, this human who'd outmaneuvered civilizations that had existed for millennia. The Galactic Council had made a mistake at those peace talks. They'd assumed humanity needed them more than they needed humanity. They'd been wrong. The galaxy was bigger now, more complicated, more chaotic. But maybe, just maybe, it was also better. Time would tell. And humanity, with their paranoia and their creativity and their absolute refusal to be controlled, would be there to see it through. Threlvix took another sip of the terrible coffee and smiled despite himself. The humans had withdrawn from peace talks, and in doing so, they'd forced everyone to finally build actual peace instead of just calling it that. Funny how that worked. Outside the massive viewing windows, ships from 100 different civilizations moved through space, following new trade routes, heading to new colonies, building a galaxy that looked nothing like the one that had existed 6 months ago. And somewhere out there, humanity kept expanding, kept innovating, kept being exactly what they'd always been. Impossible to predict, impossible to control, and absolutely impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council had learned their lesson.